We'd like to welcome you to the Helpmann Symposium. We're delighted again to be hosting this event. And of course, as you all know, there's a lot of people that are involved to make these things happen. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Richard Kay for his undying support of the school and all the work he does also on the Bauer companies. So, Richard, you've done so much to help us and so much to bring this support. We thank you so much. Thank you. Someone else who we need to thank is Mr. Arnold Clark, who's up there in the corner, who's helped bring all this audio-visual stuff together and help organize today. So, Marius, thank you very much. And the one person we can't go without thanking is Miss Anna Meadmore, who is probably one of the most dominant women I know. Every time I say no, she goes, okay, and we do it. So we're really pleased and thrilled, Anna, for all you've done to make this happen today. So thank you very much. And sadly, the one person who couldn't be with us here today, who probably would have given us such an insight into Robert Helpmann, is Galen Stock. Unfortunately, she was taken ill last year, and we sent her our best wishes. But sadly, she won't be with us today, but she would have brought so much to today's experience. So on that note, I think I'll be quiet, and Richard, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you very much.
And always one has to begin with thanks. And of course, as he said, there are an awful lot that are due, and particularly to Jay himself, because he's been a huge support throughout all our endeavours, and a particular thanks is due to him for facilitating the project involving dancers from the school in our attempts to reclaim part of Adam Zero. I too would like to echo his thanks to Anna Meadmore. I don't know anyone with her stamina or her tenacity. She really is a dominant woman. That's exactly the phrase for her. And also her team, Marius, Arnold Clark, and Anna Feinemann, who've supported her and us superbly throughout the weeks of creating this day. For granting us interviews, we'd like to thank Gillian Lynn and Julia Farron, Maynard Gielgud, and Dame Beryl Gray. And we particularly like to thank Dr. Victor Duravilla for filming Gillian Lynn and Julia Farron because they wanted to make contributions to the day, but neither, alas, could be with us. We'd like to thank Rupert Christensen for helpful advice in the course of our preparations and for conducting the interview at a very short notice with Maynard Gielgud. Next to thank is Alwyn Terrace for creating the wonderful filmography of Helpmann's activities in that field and for giving advice to everyone who needed film clips for their lectures today. Then it's important to thank Petal Miller Ashmole, who loaned us the multiple portrait of Helpmann, to Annette Page and Anya Linden, who loaned lovely photographs, for the Royal Ballet Benevolent Fund, who have enabled us to display Chang Li's extraordinary designs for Helpmann's The Birds, all of which are on display in the foyer, and do please take time in the course of the breaks to have a look at them. They're well worth a close study, all of those items. And also to Ray Rand for loaning us the portrait of Robert Helpmann, which is also on display. Finally, we owe a huge debt of thanks to David Drew. And I have to report that sadly he's gone back into hospital. He would have been here with us today, but his passion for Helpmann's work and his determination to try and see it back into the repertoire has been a huge impetus for our endeavours. In fact, if he hadn't got us going, I don't think we were all here today. So we're filming everything that happens, and we will certainly show it to him afterwards. And I hope you'll join me in wishing him really well. And so to Robert Helpmann. I'd like to begin by reminding you of Carol Brahms's final page in her study of Robert Helpmann. People often ask me what Robert Helpmann is like as a person. He is a man in love with the theatre. This is the first thing to be said about Helpmann. I believe he will be content for it to be the last. Love of theatre, in Helpmann's case, encompassed a great many art forms and forms of performance. Just how many took us all by surprise, everyone on the committee, as we worked to put this programme together. Because of that extraordinary range and diversity, and we're not touching on, for example, his role as a director in opera and in theatre, but because of the range and the diversity, we've decided to begin with a wonderful South Bank show on Helpmann and his career, which appropriately was made by some of his Australian friends and colleagues. We thought we'd show it to fill in all the gaps in our knowledge of Helpmann, but also to give us a good timeline. What came when and where exactly, so that we can fit things easily together. Now, Helpmann was a great raconteur, a wit, and a joker. He's a man about whom legions of anecdotes abound, naughty and otherwise. Now, the film gives the best of them a very good airing, which hopefully leaves us free to go more seriously into Helpmann's achievements and his formidable artistry. But we want to show the film primarily because it's a lovely introduction to the man himself.
The result is a work of vital and moving power, and one of the most significant ballets produced in our time. Another dance critic exclaimed, "It is impossible to believe that a ballet of superior beauty and superb force can be fashioned out of such ingredients as criminal violence, slum poverty, and psychopathic sadism." The premiere, building as it did so firmly last night, accomplished one of those rare moments on stage. For a while, the audience was just too stunned to applaud, and then the house fairly exploded. Despite Arthur Bliss's compelling musical composition, Michael Benthal's dramatic scenario, and Edward Burroughs' striking designs existing as the surviving constituents from the acclaimed 1944 production of Miracle in the Gorbals, the descending curtain of the Royal Ballet Revival at Covent Garden rendered Robert Helpmann's choreographical imprint traceless. It was essentially deemed a dead ballet, a work of its time. As evidenced by the 2011 film to follow, David Drew decided that such creative entombment had persisted for far too long.
My obsession for the last year has been for a ballet called Miracle in the Gorbals. Sir Robert Helpmann, who choreographed the ballet, had come back for a season there, and he was appearing in his own ballet as the stranger, a role he created. And I was a young lad in the company. I just joined in 1955, and I was very fortunate to be one of the Razor Gang members who, at the end of the ballet, is going to kill him. Helpmann's performance in the ballet was so convincing that I came off into the wings, convinced that I really had been part of a group of people who had just killed a very good man. Now, the power of that dramatic situation has lived with me throughout the rest of my career in the company. Recreating ballets is very hard because there's no film of it. The system which we use now, a system of dance notation, did not even exist at that time, and therefore it only can continue to live in the memory of those who performed in it. We feel that we are doing something very important, because once this generation dies, the ballet dies. And so he entirely depended on his remarkable people to keep it alive. We've had rehearsals, we've had comings together, consultations with the original score and all the notes that have been written in it, and many, many photographs. And we believe that eventually we are going to be able to bring together a very faithful reenactment of what that first ballet performance was. Because this was a ballet which appealed to ordinary people. This was not some highfalutin thing. This they could identify with. It was set in the slums. It was set in Gorbals. These were real people. On the stage you've got a beggar. He's there throughout, from beginning to end. He sort of plays his fiddle when he can from time to time. He finds fag ends. He's an extraordinary character. And you've got the prostitute that was played originally by Celia Frank and then by Julia Farren. You've got the priest who rules this community with a rod of iron. And what happens? The stranger comes in. The stranger who has this extraordinary ability to raise the dead. This poor woman who's committed suicide in the Clyde. She's lying there. Everyone can see she's dead. And yet the stranger can restore her to life. The priest becomes very jealous. This man has moved in on his turf. This cannot be tolerated. And this man of the cloth, what does he do? He gets hold of the local razor gang who keep the razors in the peaks of their caps. And they are going to set upon the Christ figure. The cap comes off. The blade is there in the peak. Slash, slash. This is the whole basis of this scenario. The Christ figure, whenever he reappears, in whatever generation, at whatever point in history or geographically, is doomed always, finally, to be crucified.
For 3 years, David has sought to reawaken Helpmann's dance drama using archival ephemera and the memories and embodied knowledge of surviving cast members. Henry Danton, Julia Farren, Jean Bedell's, Gillian Lynn and Pauline Claydon, affectionately labelled by David as the Fab Five. Sadly, due to travel difficulties and poor health, neither the members of the Fab Five nor the valiant David Drew are present here today. This presentation therefore seeks to honour their work in progress, sharing a series of 8 short video clips that may serve as potential points of departure for the scheduled discussions later this afternoon. It should be noted at the outset that the majority of the footage captured over the last 36 months would not have been possible without the camera equipment, the skills and the patience of Nigel Hodgson, who was there in the corner. Special thanks also to the organisational brilliance of Anna Meadmore, to Maris Arnold Clark, and indeed the Royal Ballet School, to Francesca Franchi and her team at the Royal Opera House Collections, and finally, supportive Symposium committee team themselves. My involvement in documenting and observing the Gorbals Recreator project since 2011 has fueled my own PhD research into intergenerational creativity, aiming to celebrate the senior dancer as an essential design constituent within the ballet-making process. It is indeed this process that leads us to the first stage of how best to revive Helpmann's lost narrative, retracing the ballet's inception through the eyes of one of its initiators, Michael Benport.
During the war, Benthall was a captain in the artillery, and he was stationed at the garrison in Glasgow, just across the Clyde from the Gorbals. And as a result of being there, he conceived this idea of taking an existing play, which was by Jerome K. Jerome, which was called The Passing of the Third Floor Back. But Benthall took this story and made it much more dramatic and set it in the most notorious slums in Europe, which were, at that time, the Gorbals in Glasgow.
Helpmann's performative response to Benthall's heightened narrative is difficult to negotiate beyond the traces of visual ephemera. The solution to such a revival challenge, Pauline Claydon. When asked if the reconstructed method of mining the corporeal histories of first-generation dancers had drawbacks in terms of fading or changing memories, one dance academic asserted, "You are not going to get anything hard and fast from someone who is 85 because she has danced these pieces 60 years ago. But you will get what she feels about them, what's still in her. Even though it's changed over the years, you get clues. All you're going to get are clues." Such a claim appears legitimate. However, early footage from one of the first Gorbals study days at the Royal Opera House reveals the lucidity and clarity with which Pauline recalls specific structural elements from the wartime ballet, having not danced her suicide solo for over 60 years. Captured by the camera work of Bennett Gartside, we see Clayton, aged 90, attempting to reawaken Helpmann's choreography within herself before transmitting, through photographic and gestural evidence, her reappropriated knowledge to Royal Ballet dancer Kristen McNally.
You know, everyone's brilliant, but there's nobody quite, or not enough people.
Because this lady thinks we shouldn't bring it back.
Well, I know, but that's what I picked up on when she said that it's just steps, so I don't think it'll work. But it does, because you need to try, you know, we still need to try and make something just out of steps. You know.
See, people keep saying to me, it's different, and I keep saying, well, what's different?
Totally different. But you see, this lady over here from Archives, you know, is saying it's a masterclass, it's a privilege to be here.
Greatly inspired by Pauline's affecting re-performance, David invited Gillian Lynn, another former cast member, most celebrated for choreographing Cats and Phantom of the Opera, to seize the reconstructed mantle by leading a study day at the Royal Ballet School, where dance students, teachers and actors of various ages and abilities collaborated with the Fab Five to present a 15-minute reworking of 4 Gorbals sequences. Underscored by Bliss's climatic and turbulent music, we see the distressing entry of the suicide's body, the stranger's eerie arrival, the dance of deliverance, and finally the fractious collision between prostitute and the minister. During the study day's proceedings, Francesca Franchi and Patricia Linton whisked the Fab Five into a neighbouring classroom for a discussion about their thoughts on the ballet, on Helpmann himself, and on the sustainability and authenticity of the ballet as a reconstructive initiative. Gillian begins this 10-minute sequence by responding to the question, how much of the choreography was your innovation and how much was Helpmann's? Kindly forgive the inconsistent sound quality.
An awful lot of it was me because none of us could remember. You only remembered, Jean remembered bits, Pauline remembered bits, everyone else was new, and because they were arguing about, which I thought, well, no, we would be here all night, so I just went and did it myself. But after all, I was in it right from day one. I grew up in it. It's in my bones, and also I would want to, I'd have to thicken up the subjects a bit more, not the principles, but we'd have to create just a little bit more undercut, maybe another couple of characters, so it's not quite so clear-cut, and I think that wouldn't be difficult to do. It's a piece of theatre, rather more than a ballet. It's a dance drama, and dance dramas, I think, are very interesting, and they make for a good, it's good for a company, because it's so different from what they do normally, it opens them up. They aren't used to working with dramatic subtext, and you have to have that for this ballet. So I was pushing at that at them all day, but it isn't something you learn like fifth jump, and that's easier to learn. Robert Helpmann, Bobby, was a wonderful director, and being such a good actor himself, he could teach what I've been talking about, this subtext and this acting which has to go into the movement. He could teach us that because that's what he was. So that was an eye-opener for us. So it was thrilling.
I was at that time in the corps de ballet and didn't do the prostitutes until we actually got to Covent Garden. And this was a completely new thing, and we sort of fell into it. It was like a breath of fresh air, instead of just being ballet dancers and going around at the point. We were being asked to act more than dance, actually.
We actually collaborated a lot in it because it's what we wanted. And I think that's why my particular part, the parts I had, I was able to do what I felt. I felt that these people had a specific way of walking, a specific way of feeling certain things.
I was quite surprised at the time when the first cast was shown, I think in the Haskell book, and it was down with Fontaine as the suicide. And obviously that was his first thought, it was Margot is going to do it. How that came about, I have no idea.
I was the mother of the young female lover, and I got terribly angry when she had an affair with her boyfriend, and I stood up on the balcony and shouted at her to come back. And that was about it, really.
I think just Bobby left it to us to interpret, really, what his movements were to mean. He never gave us any kind of clue. I mean, as a suicide, I was never told why I was committing suicide, but there were slight clues in the choreography that kind of lent themselves to certain things, because in mine, that is the mother, and at one point, this comes in, and I felt it must be something to do with the death of her mother or something to do with her mother.
That was the first chance I had of getting out and acting, because, it's so used to being in fifth edition classical stuff. It was really marvellous to get out and do some acting.
He got the response from the members of the company who were, who came from all different backgrounds, not necessarily having 100% classical ballet training.
I think, a lot of it was left to one's own kind of feelings, really, because when he was killed at the very end and one had to run forward, all I could remember was him saying, you run forward and you see me, and then you turn and you crumble and cry. But he didn't kind of say what kind of reaction there should be. And I mean, I just felt completely stunned by it. To me, it was just, you couldn't believe what you were seeing. So there was that moment of absolutely nothing before it really, the penny dropped as to what had happened, and then to turn and cry.
But the boys, these are heavy guys. They work hard. They have big muscles, big legs, They were, they had a special way of walking, a special way of doing this, The Linus also, he's such a tight, frustrated person. As he couldn't move because he was such a false person, a really false character. I actually got write-ups onto my part out of the Calder Valley. I have write-ups saying, Danton was good at the dock work, and I thought it was ridiculous with that in the Calder Valley.
When we first did it, I remember being at the New Theatre, and I was standing at the bottom of the stairs, and Bobby Helpmann had a dressing room just opposite our Calder Valley, we went Calder Valley service room, and down the stairs came Vivian Lee and Lawrence and Olivia, who were great chums of his, of course. And Bobby came out to greet them, and Olivia said, "There she is, that girl in purple." And Bobby said to me afterwards, he thought you were very good. And I thought, I was in the Calder Valley. And Olivia's,
Anyone remembers about that dance? I suppose I could hum the music up to a point, but it's the rhythms of it I can remember. And so much of it is on the beat, and I can visualise it, and I've carried it with me for years. And it's funny how some things you can, some things you can't, and some ballads I just can't remember anything about. The things that are very much definitely on the beat and have a rhythm, I seem to remember.
As far as the steps are concerned, what I did as a prostitute, for instance, I cannot remember it. I know the feeling of it, but I cannot remember the steps. Trying desperately hard to find where I can remember most of the ballets that I did, and I did dozens of them. I could probably run through, because I think there were steps, and I was trained as a classical dancer, so that comes naturally. Whereas this, much as I absolutely adored doing it, doesn't come out of me. It's gone. It's lost. And eventually we went to the photographs, which were quite helpful, and so we sort of linked the photographs together, so it was various pictures.
So many people have said, it's something so different from what they've done before. I can't see it's different, quite honestly. I just kind of do what I remember doing, that's all.
He left an awful lot to us, actually. Even to the point, actually not you do it, but the wardrobe people, they made me go and buy a pair of shoes in a very cheap shop in Oxford Street, one of those awful places with awful shoes, terrible. And I gaily went in and found myself a pair of purple shoes. I actually found purple shoes, which went with my purple coat, because it was completely naturalistic. There wasn't any deference to stage costume. We were dressed in what were rather brash, ordinary clothes.
At one point we had to get Greco paintings because he had this feeling of composition of the pictures. I remember that I went to the National Gallery and I bought them. I still have them, funnily enough. When David started talking about this, they talked about the front drop. It was marvellous. I thought it was wonderful. I'd never seen it. But the sets were very good. They were marvellous. They stank. They really smelled bad.
Robert Helpmann was an inspiration. He was not a great classical dancer, but he was an artist, and he knew exactly what he wanted.
Helpmann had a way of touching people that bring out something special in them, and everything's changed. It's really realistic. What they call now realistic theatre, or realistic theatre and television. And he was way ahead of his time.
There hadn't been anything quite like it, and everybody was quite excited doing something different.
Some people didn't think it was right. Ballet, found was pretty. Dukes and wands, and there were quite a lot of... But I think the critics were pretty good about it.
The younger generation are inclined to be, they're computerized and they're not really feeling anything too much. I think it'd be very good for them. They have to feel, that life is passionate, it's emotional. And I think that was why it can be revived now, because it's about human emotions which have not changed. It's not out of date at all. I mean, it's contemporary, but human emotions have not changed.
Gillian insists that Helpmann's choreography remains in her bones, that she grew up with it, serving as an influential, embodied creative force within her own choreographic practice. All of the Fab Five reference the power of dance as a piece of theatre, and nowhere is this better represented than in the leading performance of Helpmann himself as the stranger.
One of the most amazing things about his performance in Miracle in the Gorbals is that Bobby, whose inclination was to be outrageous and way over the top, and by today's terms, I mean, you know, melodramatic in the extreme, in this ballet, he was so, as we say in the theatre, so controlled. It was totally convincing and natural. You didn't get any feeling of acting at all. He had an inner presence. It was all within him. He helped you to believe that he really was a very special, holy man, which was a fantastic performance on his part, because in real life, Bobby certainly was not. And he would be the first to admit it. He had a wicked sense of humour. He created drama. He created narrative. He created everything theatrical, but not really steps. And so you have this strange situation of almost a ballet without steps. So is it really a ballet at all? That's one of the reasons why I think it's so important we should bring it back. Because I believe, and I hope many others will, that it is still a ballet, even though it seems to have so few steps. So it makes us question our own presumptions about what the art form is.
Helpmann's 1940s choreography established a platform where ballet and drama could meet disharmoniously, perhaps, resulting in his detractors stating passionately, "This is not ballet at all." The question remains, if the Royal Shakespeare Company, for example, were to revive the production at the Sadler's Wells Theatre, would Helpmann's creation still constitute dance? This warrants further discussion, however more so pressingly. In privileging drama above definitive steps, Gillian is quick to assert that she does not operate as a choreographic archaeologist, instead striving to resurrect the spirit and the subtext of Helpmann's choreography, even if it requires additional dancers and subtext. Here is a musically distorted sequence from another study day where Gillian, along with 4 Royal Ballet dancers, attempts to reimagine the lovers' pas de deux. It is apparent that the reawakening of Miracle and the Gorbals reinforces the widely accepted belief that ballet is essentially a living force, handed down from master to master, redistributed and reappropriated from generation to generation. It is this process of recursion that leaves us today with David's concluding comments on the broader contributions and the value of the senior performer, not merely as a conduit for one idiosyncratic ballet for Robert Helpmann, but as an invaluable assessor of a company's balletic repertoire. David and his revival team remain optimistic that Helpmann's choreographic text will continue to be reawakened in such an intergenerational and pragmatic way during 2014. And I hope that those present today will have an opportunity to attend a completed re-performance next year. Here is David's final voiceover.
You have to call at some stage on the opinion of those people who are still alive and can give you what you believe is a valuable assessment of that work and whether or not it should be revived. Now, the number of people who have some working knowledge of about 100 years of those ballets from Diaghilev through to today are fast diminishing. And this is why when Dame Monica Mason said to me a fortnight or so ago, well, you're right, David, yes, we really are the bridge generation, because we can speak from first-hand knowledge, and there are some still alive, a bit older than us, who probably knew an earlier repertoire, but not the more up-to-date one. So Monica and I, who know 60 years of the repertoire, that is a big chunk. And we would like to think, I mean certainly she, who's directed the company brilliantly for 10 years, that person's opinion and taste should be listened to and respected, then she becomes a particularly precious older person in terms of the development of the art form and the selection of repertoire.
Thank you for your time.